Hello and welcome to the Story Kiosk, a new community podcast sharing short, true stories written by you, our listeners. That's the idea, anyway. This is episode 1, or episode 0 if you prefer, of the show, a sort of getting to know us, what's all this then origin story for the Story Kiosk. First, I suppose you deserve to know a little bit about me. My name is Julian. By day, I'm a copy editor, have been for around 10 years now. I'm also an occasional casual writer and an always reader, a real great big nerdy bookworm, to be honest. As it happens, I think almost every good idea I've ever had for a project began life in something that I was reading, including, in fact, the spark, the flicker of an idea that set this current venture in motion. A few months ago, I read True Tales of American Life, a collection of short stories edited and introduced by the late novelist Paul Auster, who we might consider sort of the patron saint of this podcast. That anthology emerged from the National Story Project, which was hosted by NPR, the National Public Radio in the United States. That ran for a couple of years from 1999. Auster fronted the project, selecting, editing, and reading aloud on the radio some of his favorite short stories that NPR listeners had sent in. I found the collection to be absolutely magical. The stories were so varied, but all very personal and charming and surprising and beautiful. Even just the introduction that Auster wrote for that anthology was really inspiring and moving all by itself. So much so that my first thought upon finishing reading the collection was basically, why in the world doesn't this project still exist? Is there or was there something like it here in the UK where I live? And I couldn't for the life of me find something quite like it, which really bothered me because the National Story Project was such a good idea. And I thought, screw it. Sure, I'm no Paul Auster, but I love reading, I love writing, I love words in general. I'm an editor by trade, and I'm pretty okay at it. Also, I'm a big fan of podcasts, so you throw all that into a pot, you give it a stir, and you get this idea, this show, what we're calling the Story Kiosk. So that's the what and some of the why, but the bump of inspiration that I got from that collection of short stories will only carry me so far. For the long term, we'll have to dig a little deeper, to answer why is this project worth pursuing, why now, and why should you care at all. Your answers might well be different from mine, but for me, from my experience, I'd say that writing and reading are the best way to organize our thoughts, to make sense of the world, and to share our experiences in a nuanced, personal way. And the more sincere, personal stories you hear and you read, the more you realize that we're all of us struggling with the same fears, nursing the same hopes, and that the differences between us are superficial, and we all have something to learn from one another. And in a time when today AI threatens to supplant not just writing, but all sorts of creative human acts, when a lot of social media seems more hollow by the day, when basic literacy skills are on the decline, I think we could all stand to take a breath, read more, write more, to really listen to each other. And if we here at the show can help with that, even in just bite-sized ways, that'd be just amazing. Which I suppose brings us to you, dear listener. Now, I can ask and have asked some friends of mine to contribute stories, to give us a foundation from which to build, to have some material for our first crop of episodes at least. And eventually, I'll probably pluck up the courage and share one myself, maybe in the early going, maybe the first episode. I haven't really decided yet. But in the long term, this entire endeavor will live or die by your submissions. And my first promise to you would be that I'm going to read everything that is sent in. We want this project to be diverse, not an echo chamber. Anyone at all is welcome to submit a story. It doesn't matter what age you are, or what you do, or where you're from. And it definitely doesn't matter if you've ever written before. As for the sort of story that we're looking for at the Story Kiosk, there's only a couple of hard and fast rules, really. First, it needs to be brief, a maximum of 2 or 3 pages, but paragraph-length stories are also cool. Something like at least 100 words, 1,000 at most. And second, it needs to be true. It needs to be something from your life, some moment that has struck you, stayed with you, or moved you. But other than that, I mean, submissions should please be in English. Maybe someday we'll have editions or episodes in other languages. But I can only edit in English. Also, I think this should go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. No hate speech. Please, obviously. There, besides, no subject is off limits. Really, we don't want to be prescriptive in that way. That being said, I know that a blank page can be quite scary, so if you need a jumping off point, maybe try something like this. Tell us a story about a moment or a time in your life when you felt your place in the world come into focus. A moment of self-discovery or self-understanding, a moment of clarity. It doesn't necessarily have to be a positive or uplifting story. It could be a negative story or a scary story. It could be neutral. Whatever takes your fancy, really. Hopefully that's not all too vague. I do think prompts can be really helpful as a means to get out of your own way as a writer, just literally to start moving. And when you do put pen to paper and just go, that sort of free writing will, in my experience, open really interesting avenues and reveal things that, when you think about them later, have probably been sitting in the back of your mind for a really long time. As for the path from on the page to submitted to the podcast to actually read on here, full details are available on our website. I'm sure there are links in the show notes and stuff, but just to say it out loud, it's www.storykioskpod.com. That's where all submissions have to go through. And like I said at the top, I am a copy editor. I do expect to edit the stories submitted to varying degrees. Most will, I'm sure, need a very light touch. Others maybe a bit more back and forth. But the second promise I'll make is that the writer's voice will always be respected. People who submit will be consulted on any edits and have final say on whether they're happy for an edited version to be shared on the podcast. I'm never going to share one without getting the green light from you first. Equally, submitting to the show doesn't automatically mean that a story will definitely appear on the podcast. That's partly for logistical reasons. In the beginning, we may not have loads and loads of submissions, but in the future, I do hope that we have basically the opposite problem of having so many submissions that we need to find other ways beyond the podcast to share the very best. But I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. I mean, sure, I've already had daydreams about where this could lead, whether that's publishing a real ink on paper anthology, or opening a physical neighborhood kiosk even, or a dozen other plans and pipe dreams. Anyway, that's all for later, much, much later. For now, dear listener, if you want to learn more about us, the website is the best place. Again, that's www.storykioskpod.com. Also the only place to put submissions forward for the show. You can also find us on Instagram at the same handle. It's at StoryKioskPod. And if this project caught your fancy, or even just sounds mildly interesting to you, then please share it with your family or your friends, or even your enemies. We don't discriminate. Everyone's welcome. But that's more than enough from me for this episode, for episode 0 of the show. So I'll just finish by saying thank you for listening. I hope you join us again. And wherever in the world you are right now, we wish you a good morning, a good day, or a good night. See you next time.